All right, it's 8 o'clock, so we're going to start the meeting. And welcome everybody. Let's see. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the October 18, 2013 Executive Committee meeting. Anyone have a chance to peruse them?
I did, and I guess I'd like to pass on my compliments to Shana for doing a great job on minutes. We talked about a lot of stuff that kind of convoluted way. The minutes actually made sense, and it sounded like the meeting I attended. So I will, with those comments, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Oh, on the minutes? Okay.
Yes. The agenda item 2A, page 3 of 7, item B, executive director review. During the discussion dealing with the type of format that will be used for the executive director's review, Sandy Keynes made a formal announcement that she wanted for inclusion into the meeting's record to show her concerns as to what format would be used. I observed no mention of her request in the meeting minutes. Comments?
Just says we discussed. Right?
What's that? Put into the
So
minutes?
what was your source, Bill?
During the discussion,
Right, we did have a discussion.
yes. You made
You wanted to see the
a formal declaration that you wanted to go on record.
Let's see in the format.
Yes.
Right.
Remember, it was so that this evaluation would be based on what your expectations were in terms of how it was set up.
And not-
Subsequent evaluations might be connected to the meetings.
I'm just wondering what Bill's source was for this.
The conversations, I remember her making an announcement. That's the source, my memory.
Just that this time you're being evaluated as regular, and then what we thought for the next evaluation, we want to
You
see.
made a
Whatever
motion
format
about it.
you were
You
going to
wanted it on the
operate.
record. You
Yeah.
wanted it on the record.
Yeah, that they were going to come up with a new one, right.
Okay.
So can we get, you're going to hand that over to Shana so that we can have the wording?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, that's an amendment, form of amendment, right?
Great.
Okay, so, then a motion to accept the, well, get a vote on the amendment.
Right.
Uh,
So, I'll second the Bill's amendment.
Okay.
Okay, you second.
All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yay.
Okay. Now we're up against the original motion to approve the minutes of the October 18, 2013 Executive Committee meeting. And that motion's already been made, seconded to it, as amended. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. All right.
Just for the record, I'm looking on this. So you made the original motion and the second one.
Bill.
Bill.
Bob. Yeah. Okay. Now, the November monthly minor revision.
There are none missing.
Run on this one. I was going to say, I haven't seen it.
That's what you recall. I had
The
to
minutes
ask 3
reflect none.
times. Couldn't believe it.
Okay, discussion items. SRPC organizational executive director goals for the 2014, which we all have in front of us.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
The percentages that are following the sort of three major categories, is that sort of the weighting given to the accomplishment of tasks in those areas? The 50% and the 40%, 10%?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking of it as a portion of time. Is that similar? So,
Okay, that certainly wasn't what I was thinking of.
so there's the thinkers and the doers.
I'm glad I asked the question.
The doers thinking of it is the number of hours.
Right. And that makes a big difference. If we're saying that 50% of what you're going to be evaluated on are the organizational goals, and 40% is the executive director goals, 10% is the special focus areas, that's a whole lot different than expecting your hours to be divided up that way.
I never even thought of hours. I've never seen anything set up that way.
So how are you thinking?
Basically, in the evaluation, you weight 50% on the organizational goals, 40% on the other goals, and 10% on the special items. And those were initially arbitrary numbers. They can be shifted. As an example, if you have really hot stuff going in a particular year on the special focus, you might want to bump that and take it out someplace else.
And can I ask one other question? So, and this is a result of the meeting that happened after our last meeting. Right, this is the product of that. Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to go through these?
That's entirely, I don't know, unless there are some questions or people want more time, whatever you want.
I would like more discussion on this.
I'd like to hear how this was developed. I mean, what, because you did it, you did it,
Well,
and I know the discussion
The
last
evaluation
time,
committee
so I'd like to.
met with
Right.
Cynthia.
So I'd just like some information on your thoughts and how you.
This basically was a distillation of all the work that's been done at various times earlier in the year. So a lot of the initial input was from earlier meetings in the small room, if you remember, and the various goals and objectives, and they were just brought into a single document. The concept being the basic breakdown, organization, I never remember, executive director goals, and then special focus should form the basis for ongoing evaluations in the future, although tasks might change year to year. So to try and create a framework that would be consistent moving forward. And then the specifics were really a distillation of everything that had gone before. And a lot of it was, I believe, from material that Cynthia had developed in the past, and we had met and discussed. And remember, we did all the charts on the walls and everything. So that's really a distillation of all that work.
I think it would be good to go through the items that are letter items and then see if people agree that they're in the right place. So,
All right, so we'll start on continued focus on economic development. Item A, capacity building.
so that could be, in past years that could have been hazard mitigation because that was a capacity building new focus area for us. So that could change over time, but what it's looking at is an organizational capacity building. Does someone want me to go through this? So the next one is item B, which is execute recurrent planning activities in a consistent and timely manner. And as you look down that, you can see we have a lot of cyclical processes. Some are annual and some are every 3 to 4 to 5 years. And so what's here is those recurrent planning activities.
I actually have two questions. One is on an acronym, number 7.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I put the acronym because I actually didn't know what EMP was. Oh, wait, I can look it up right now.
Why, is it the name of a company or something?
No, it's the statewide data, assessment data. Okay.
While Cynthia's looking that up, let me ask my second question. The only concern that I have about that one is whether or not the subcommittee felt as though that this was a measurable deliverable. Everything down to there is, receive designation, secure, submit, carry out, hold meetings, complete the update, complete the gas, complete the annual. This one is continue to implement. So to me, this is a little softer, but there may be sort of measures of what continuing is, and I just want to make sure the committee felt comfortable with a way to measure that.
Yeah. So it stands for Statewide Asset Data Exchange System.
Okay.
And that's what the exchange, I couldn't remember. So this one is here because of the last 2 words, performance metrics. So in the future, part of our recurrent planning activities is going to be focused on creation of and preparation of and analysis of performance metrics.
Correct. And again, I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure that the continuing to implement, I don't know if the continuing to implement has sort of thresholds that you've met that are measurable. It's just, if I'm going to be tasked with something, I like to have something where I can clearly say.
You measure yourself how far in you already.
Exactly. Or if somebody is asking me, I like to be able to say, I have done this on such and such a date and that on such and such a date, so it's actually measurable. To continue to sounds like doing the same thing, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some pieces or measurable tasks that
It's actually, we're a participant and collaborator in partnership. So it's one of those areas where we can do ours, and if the partners aren't ready to move forward, then we get limited by how much others are in.
Okay.
I think the answer to your question is that's something that would need to be carried into a quarterly item for me.
Okay. That's fine. I just think.
That's a legitimate point. Absolutely. If it's in there, we should have some visibility of what's happening, rather than worrying about an absolutely quantitative number, a qualitative evaluation.
Okay, so just to clarify, because the reason it's worded that way is because, one, you had talked about in the past about what is it that we actually have control over, and, we can drive forward, on the timeline we want. And second of all, this is a brand new area, so there's going to be a lot just trying to get it started.
Sure. And that makes sense to have that more qualitative, and then move to a more quantitative engagement. Okay, thank you.
So I have a note that we need to carry this forward and report out at quarterly meeting. Okay. The next area is execute one-time regional planning activities on budget and on schedule. And you can see this year it's an extraordinary amount of work. So there could be a year where there's only 1 or 2 items on this, and that would allow us to put our focus more on item E, where we spend more time working on the recurrent planning activities.
And I think a lot of what you're going to see in C is going to be driven by any grants and contracts as they show up. That's why most of those are not permanent ongoing. They may occur over a 2 or 3 year period and then they're gone. So the idea was to capture the routine, relatively routine, repetitive operations, even if they weren't annual, then move on to the more unique one time.
So the categories A, B, C would stay the same, but the tasks would change over time. Okay. I'm glad we're talking this through so we all better understand it. And then D is identify and expand funding sources. So that's pretty clear there. And then the next section looks at, so these were organizational goals, and then the next section looks at executive director goals. So the first one is provide direction and oversight of staff work effort, production schedules, and resource needs. Which is pretty straightforward. B is expand the nature and span of outreach efforts. And then the tasks for this year are listed there.
If we get back on item A, if I could, you would also be utilizing your HR person too in some of that, some of those lines too, would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
C is provide continuous, fully compliant, and transparent fiscal oversight and management. And the two items 4 and 5 in red were, I wasn't sure whether they fit here or whether, these are specific aspects of the questions you brought up last time about the dues paying communities and an outlook, to encourage communities to pay dues and be active partners in the commission. So I wasn't sure where those were, whether they are in this section or in the other. So if you're comfortable there, we'll just cover it.
I think they're fine there with the assumption that we reach these goals, they'll drop off in a year or so, depending on the situation.
Just a question, is there a particular, in some ways, I think I would say that bringing communities back to dues-paying status is sort of a responsibility of all of us, not just the executive director. So is there a particular reason why the committee put this under the executive director goals as opposed to putting it under organization goals?
My thinking is organizational goals of the organization under the executive director. If you're talking about us, we're not under the executive director. It is not our staff's job per se. That should be the specific focus of the executive director and the commissioners.
Okay. That's helpful also that so I'm not sure whether the term organizational goal, because when I was looking at that, when I looked at that phrase, I'm thinking the entire organization. We're part of the executive committee, we're part of the membership, but that's part of our responsibility to provide the resources and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to sort of being focused on, it's all reflected on staff. Okay.
Remember, the other purpose here is how we're judging Cynthia. We can't judge her on what we're supposed to do.
That's a very good point. But I still would argue that I'm not sure that it's the executive director's responsibility.
I'm not so sure that this is under my control. I think number 4 is something that I'm not so sure I control it. Number 5, developing a global view, I think that's something that, yes, definitely.
Right. I think it's one sort of a dilemma in my mind. Number 4 is really important. In fact, part of the context that we talked about was how can we show that we're providing value to encourage people and make them want to rejoin us. So that clearly is really, really important. On the other hand, to say that it's the executive director's responsibility to do this, when there are things that she can do, but she's not the one that's voting. The selectmen are voting, or the town meeting voting, or the city council voting. So the question is, how do you include it in some ways? Because it's really an overarching, it's really an important goal, but not put responsibility for someone to accomplish something over which they don't have control.
Well, certainly, it's certainly the office, it's the goal of the Strafford Regional Planning Commission office to try. We discussed this a couple of meetings ago, I believe. So what we were
They
hoping
carried
from-
forward from that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think they're legitimate points. I did not originally bring up number 4, and I have no problem with it coming out of this document.
I brought it up. It was
And then
an
the question is, where do we put it?
It was more an aspirational goal.
But again, do we need a smaller, well, as an example, a cover letter or letter of transmittal that addresses the organization as distinct from the employees as a whole of the organization? As Cynthia said, it's an aspirational goal, no problem with taking it out.
Well, how about this? Maybe this is the way, coming up with something that works. What about tasking the executive director to come up with a strategy or propose strategies for bringing two communities back to its main status? Then it's something we can do. That strategy may include tasks or responsibilities of us.
That's why I would think, it's acceptable to Cynthia.
Yes, that's fine.
And that's why she had it read.
Yeah.
Question?
I have a question, Dr. Cassidy, because this brings up the fact that the organization goals, the goals that you talked about, where SRPC is going, is being combined with the executive director evaluation goals. And so is there going to be a separate document about our goals so that what Ken was saying, plug in there, or is it all the overarching goals stuff going to go into the executive director?
In my mind, and I probably never articulated, because we really haven't had the discussion, would those goals we're now talking about be more properly reflected in the Commissioner's Handbook or some other document that's distinct from this, which is designed specifically to allow a framework for evaluation?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have an answer because we haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
But shouldn't some of those larger overarching strategic goals, where should they be reflected, I guess is the question.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do we need, as an example, an annual goal statement in the handbook? You know, I'm open to but I agree with what you're saying, but it wasn't where I was focused.
Yeah.
Those are good ideas. Because then it clarifies for the commissioners what their role is.
Not only that, theoretically, if we have people sign each year that they've read the book, that can be part of what we hand people so we all know what we're doing.
So what is the process for updating the handbook? Does it happen annually or?
Yes, it happens annually. So we do it in the first quarter, and we release it at the first quarter meeting in September.
So is updating the handbook already one of the tasks here?
No.
No.
Is there?
And I'm not sure that's,
It's Maryland does that.
I don't-
It's in HR.
That doesn't belong in here.
yeah, that's my feeling too.
We talked about an important issue. I just want to make sure it doesn't sort of slip through the cracks. So I guess part of what my request would be that information would be conveyed to Marilyn that when she does her next review or update of the handbook,
That would include this new
that we at least talk about.
Okay.
We agree what should be those larger organizational goals, which includes everyone as distinct from the staff and director goals.
And that's a way of making sure that this conversation gets reflected in further deliberation. So,
Will we be able to look at, review a copy of the draft of the handbook?
That's always been,
Yeah, I know, but I'm asking the question.
I don't know that there's an automatic need, but I'm open to discussion. I think the changes are what need to be reviewed, not a review of the handbook each year.
so maybe what we could request would be that Marilyn, when she begins her process, maybe I think one of the weekends for us to talk about that so that she can incorporate our thoughts into it.
yeah, I'd like to start the process earlier, like in January, because we're so booked that adding one item in, we need to schedule it way in advance.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to keep flexibility, but it's really very structured right now.
But that way, I think, at least it heads in the direction that you're wanting to head in, and that is that that Maryland's not just doing this on her own without knowing what our thoughts, that we ought to, to the extent that we have some ideas about that.
Yeah, and then I think that will accomplish those concerns and also other concerns that have been brought
But
up.
I think building on Bill's concern, would it make sense, regardless of what has been done in the past, to put out an email, if necessary, I'll draft it for everybody's approval, to all the commissioners, letting them know that the handbook's being revised, and if they have any comments, thoughts, or inputs. I don't know if we've done that. I know I've never seen that, and I'm not, it's a suggestion. It's a suggestion. Is that something we as the EC would like to see happen this time?
I would.
And that's fine.
I think that every document needs to be refreshed on occasion. Maybe doesn't mean that she hasn't been doing a good job, it's just a good scan, a few suggestions here and there for improvement.
Do you want me to draft up an email, or is that something you guys should leave to handle? I'm not trying to take anything away from you, and again, I'm trying
Well,
to
it
be,
should probably come from the officers, the executive committee.
so I'll draft something up for you.
Anybody,
And we'll meet with Marilyn in January so that she has time to get it in.
everybody content with that? All right. Yeah.
I just have one point about the,
Oh, so, yes.
just going back to the under executive director goals. As far as outreach efforts, could there be something specific about outreach directly to communities? Just actually being out there, showing up at counties from time to time. Because I just didn't see it in the cast included. Is that just an oversight, or is it doing something here, or do people think it doesn't belong?
So I was looking at this as expansion, so I wasn't seeing it as ongoing activity.
Okay, so it's assumed that it's already happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
so
would have
because-
been my response also.
Okay, because some of these other things here are already happening as well, so.
But there was one time where, so a lot of these are focused on the redesign of the website, adding the online mapping function and creation of e-documents. So,
Yeah.
and then we have our social media people who, Shayna just attended a course at the community college, and so that she could have the possibility of earning certification in social media. So we're trying to expand our strength and our breadth in this.
Okay, because some of this sort of sounds like it's ongoing, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it is. They are for activities that are ongoing, but we're changing how it works, or adding new capacity and new functions. Like last year, we did the Facebook, and we added the blog last year, the blog magazine.
On that, getting off track just a moment, I am very pleased with the number of emails I'm now receiving from Srpc announcing various events and courses and webinars. I'm very pleased to see all of that. And I think that supports exactly what we're talking about here.
And I'm definitely getting feedback about that from people in my town. They really feel more connected to SRPC's support.
And we have a small crowd coming in for the APA webinars. We specifically did that to pull in community members and have them have a chance to get to learn and also to talk with others and see what's going on. So we've done one on ethics of transportation modeling and smart growth. And the next one coming up is, I think, December 4th on fiscal impact analysis.
Which one, are you on the distribution list from FCTC, City of Coltrane, which is primarily law enforcement for this community, which they're doing a series of free webinars that theoretically we could be a host site for. See if I may have read that one already.
Okay. So I think on C, the ones in red, we're going to under a staff professional development program. And E is plan for the updated employee handbook with executive committee review. So, reward listing. Oh, that's the employee handbook.
Employee.
Sorry, yes. So, so we'll add the, sorry. Could I add the other one?
What are you talking about, Dan?
Basically, we're talking about, if I understand Cynthia and the discussion correctly, do we need an F, Commissioner's Handbook Annual Update?
Yeah, I think
Just
we'll
that
add it
simple.
in.
Oh, yeah, no, we,
Yeah,
Under
that's
D.
it.
That's a great idea.
I
Yeah,
thought we
that's
added
it.
F.
Yeah.
Good.
Added as F. E is plan for the updated employee vote, F would be update the Commissioner's Handbook.
Yeah, exact, so very similar language,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, all right, and then the special focus areas for 2014. A lot of these are in this area because there are things that we really don't control, we can add input. So these, because this was a asset year, 10-year plan year, a lot of these are focused on projects in the 10-year plan. And D is our strategic plan assessment, and then E is the development of performance measures for the organization and executive director. So,
I could add some of those concerns.
I had a question on the Act, this is about the full funding. I think Ken made a statement about what we really didn't have too much control over the funding for those projects.
correct, because remember the original draft, the way the wording was, it was like, we should make sure that there was funding, and we don't have control over that. But we do have control over acting as a proponent. So I feel comfortable with that terminology. Again, it's more of a qualitative thing than necessarily, although it could be attending certain meetings or convening groups, so there could be some quantitative.
I think from a regional standpoint, any pressure or any communication to the state, not just the DOT, but the council or anybody else or the state senators, would most logically have to be based on the work that's being done here at SRPC, so I think it's quite appropriate.
Well, what I will say though, is that at least the Rochester Chamber of Commerce as another entity is very interested in this issue. So there may be some collaborative relationships that sort of get back to our economic development stuff that might tie into that.
If we should send 17 letters instead of one letter, that counts.
So, Bill, my concern before was the phraseology sounded like you had control over it. I'm okay with the act as. That may or may not be acting as a proponent. That may or may not feel comfortable with you, but it feels okay to me.
Rochester, Somersworth, Dover, Durham, these are the people that should be involved in acting. We need to get them hot.
So we might be the convener of that group of people. I mean, everybody sort of gets really excited about the 10-year plan when the formal process starts. I think what we're talking about here is beginning our activities well before the formal process starts, so that when the formal process starts, people are organized, they got their information, they're ready to go with this stuff, rather than sort of scrambling to get it all put together there.
Well, as I remember at the Gassett hearings,
Yeah.
you stepped forward
Yeah.
and was sort of representing the committee on this.
How should UNH be involved with this side of the bridge? Because they look at the traffic that goes over the bridge, goes to Durham, especially on a Friday, Saturday, sporting events, kids coming, going, parents coming, going.
So this is calling for a strategy, call it whatever you want. Big project, put it down, it's not just having Ken stand up at the podium every time we have a Gassett hearing and listen to him, plead for funding.
no, it's very, may I add on? It's very small things that happen on a daily and weekly basis for instance, on the question on the complete streets upgrade of Route 108, we got a question from DOT this week, and they wanted to know what the full description of this project was, and they had to have it within an hour for a decision in the front office, and we got the information to them, so that's acting as a proponent. And it's a lot of the stuff that people don't see because they see the meetings and the letters, but it's actually the calls and the emails requesting information or sitting down with someone and explaining to them what complete streets feels like, and what does it look like, and what's our role, and what do we need to do, and explaining how the whole process works. Not just explaining what complete streets is and how it functions, but also how the process moves that forward, and what are the decision points that need to be made.
So we're saddling you with this project to stay on top of it throughout the year.
But that's what happens every time we do 10-year plan and Gasset, and it's.
That's the role of the
Yeah,
that's the role of the
that's all of
RPCs.
the MPI.
In collaboration with DOT all the time.
DOT is going to come to the Regional Planning Commission. That is where they're going to come.
Yep.
But I do think calling this out as a separate item helps sort of sharpen what it is we're going to do, we're going to focus, and it's a high priority.
I think everybody forgets that theoretically, we could be on the opposite side as the opponent. Not, in this case, we're not, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
We need to have a position, and we need to support and work the position. In this case, it's support. They can come up with a project where the Regional Planning Commission is going to be the opposition or oppose something. That is a determination that has to be made by the MPO-RPC. And that's why this is here. It's not calling out a specific set of actions, it's stating a position.
At the Gasset hearings, the executive counselor and Senator Waters wasn't too pleased that we weren't, on point in bringing this particular item, Exit 10, and to the forefront and sort of show their displeasure, as I recall. So I think we need to have something more substantial at the Gasset hearings, rather than just having Ken come up with his normal eloquent speech.
Excuse me, I was not there. I was on vacation, which I have every right to be on vacation.
Nobody's saying.
But no, can I just make a statement? I think there was some confusion in that testimony about what our role
Whose
is.
testimony was this?
That was one of the senators.
We've been working very closely with various legislators and executive counselors and DOT and the communities, and I haven't heard from any of those parties that they're dissatisfied with our performance. And this MPO is the entity that said it's time to bring the Exit 10 and the complete streets upgrade of 108 back into the 10-year plan and the turnpike funding. So
That's why I think there was a misunderstanding of
yeah.
that.
Well, Senator Waters is new to the game.
So it's not surprising that you might
That
not
he might
have
not
all
have
the
a
background or
full-
understanding.
Yeah, he might not have a full understanding.
And that was my point. It's nothing about the work that you did. Okay, an excellent job.
Well, thank
I
you.
realize there's a lot of unknowns in this, but he did make the comment, and so did the executive director, why Mark had brought this out in his presentation. They both questioned this. But
I don't remember that whole conversation. That doesn't.
let's just move on.
Okay, the only feedback I heard about the Summersworth Gasset hearing was it went extremely well, and that's from all the parties that have just been spoken about, and we have reoccurring conversations with Senator Waters and Executive Counselor, DOT, and the communities, and we haven't heard anything that we're off track on this. So everyone's very pleased with how it's moving.
I actually ran into the commissioner, DOT, last week, and he thought it went as well.
And just to clarify, at the Commissioner of DOT at the Gassett hearing last week said, and at the Summersworth Gassett hearing, there were 9 businesses there, and we're not going to forget that. So congrats to all of you, you know, for making a very substantial, strong voice. So.
Chair, I do have another question under the special focus area. It's really important for us to complete the strategic plan.
Yes.
I also see 3 pages of stuff. A lot of work. And I guess my question to you, Cynthia, is it realistic to have here as one of the goals the completion of the strategic plan assessment by June 2014?
Well,
with everything else going on. If you think it is, then I don't have a problem with it in here. But I don't want to set us up and have something in here that we all agree at this point in time.
We can't make it.
Really, that we can't. Yeah, I don't want to set us up for failure.
okay, so looking at discussion item 3B is the assessment exercise. And I just wanted to update here. So if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll just bring forward the update that I was going to do. And so next week, there's a team of 6 people coming in, and they have a list of 37 people to interview who cover elected officials at the state legislature, the governor's office, all of the commissions that we work with, like DOT and DRAD, Health and Human Safety, Office of Emergency Management, etc., nonprofits, various groups throughout the state. There's 37 of them. They're all having 20 to 30-minute interviews with this team that's coming in, and it's financed by the National Association of Development Organizations. And we're not paying for it. It's part of our HUD grant process. So this is going to be completed next week, and then they'll go back and write it up. So that's where we stand on that. So I don't want to lose the connection. I know it's a huge amount to get done in 1 year, and that's probably why I took a vacation, because I knew it was going to be this very extraordinarily busy year coming up. But I don't want to lose the connection between the timeliness of what's said in November and where we are in June, when we have a lot of our contracts and focus changing, and we're going to have a new product out that's going to look different than what we've done in the past, our regional master plan and transportation plans. So I'd like to keep moving it forward as much as we can. It may be diminished in what it might have looked like if that was the sole primary focus for
So I guess
you.
my only question is completing it by June 14th a realistic goal?
What is that date based on?
Well, fiscal year closure, you know, so I try to do closeouts of fiscal years and quarters. So, I mean, if you want to move it into, you know, September of 2014, that would give us another 3 months over the summer. But I don't want to lose the timing between what we're hearing in November of 13 and where are we in November of 14. If you're comfortable with December of 14, you know, that's still 1 year out, so it depends what we hear.
I think if we're going to address any concern, that means taking things out somewhere else. The evaluation is going to be happening, it needs to get done. If If you want to go back and start taking some other things out because you think there's too much work there, I can understand that. I would not let this start creeping out to the right.
What is the end product? Is it to show what we're doing right? And the connection, is the connection part of some sort of funding? Is that what I'm hearing?
The purpose of line item, I mean, of this particular line item?
I think it's a normal evolutionary process of quality control that has to go on regularly, but not every year or on a fixed basis. So if we're opening the NATO interviews, now is the time to complete the process. It may be 3, 4, 5 years before we do that again. That's my understanding. Anybody who...
How do you feel about this as far as the
I feel, that's a real stretch, but I feel like if we don't do it, it's just going to eat away. And so, that's why I'm on salary.
So you feel this is critical to do by June?
Yeah, because we have major changes happening. You know, and this is talking about those major changes and who our partners are and what role do we play and how do we use digital technology and what does it mean to do performance measures, and these are very significant changes.
We're also in a time where there are both cultural and funding changes from the federal level down. The partners and monies that used to be there aren't there anymore, so that's another reason why this is an appropriate time to be undertaking this effort.
What's going to be the work product, or just the documentation of this assessment?
Some type of report.
Is it going to be something that's going to be available to people?
Yeah.
It's a very good marketing, I hate to use the word marketing, but it's a really great way to show
Yeah.
what this is doing.
I would be willing to do the assessment at home, one section at a time, bring it into, because of my limited perceptions on some levels. I would like to see where the executive director has made her marks in the exercise so that I have some sort of guidance. I don't have the full intellect that some do on some of these subjects. So I would be willing to do it at home and then bring it in if that would help.
Are we being asked under this agenda item to endorse the organizational executive director goals?
That's it for the whole purpose.
Okay. So we've gone through the discussion. We're coming up on 9 o'clock, so we're going to move it. I guess for purposes of discussion, just to see if we're ready to actually take a vote, I'll make a motion that we adopt the document as we amended it to our discussion.
I'll second.
Motion been made, seconded. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I've done the assessment exercise and I understand what Bill said. And I could go through what we have to date from staff and from the executive committee and provide my comments. And that's a relevant aspect to move it forward because then we'd have staff comments and executive committee comments from our outside partners at the state and regional level. I won't comment on that, but our aspect I could. The next step that you wanted was for us to go to our full commission and our partners around in our region. And I haven't had the time to do that because I got tasked with another outreach event that I've been working on right now. So that leads to number 4, the non-public. We don't really have a need to go into that because we aren't at that point yet.
Oh, okay. So that's not, item 4 is, like you said, not at that point yet.
No.
Okay. And that brings us up to updates.
I just put that there because You can't go into non-public unless it's on the agenda, so. At least that's my understanding.
Okay. Updates, the Hampshire Rail Authority, New England Rail Coalition.
Actually, as soon as I leave here, I'm going to a meeting. People are pretty excited. You know, the new commissioner is on board totally with it.
On board.
I'm
On
sorry.
board, right?
Sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Good
sorry.
job,
Sorry.
Sandy.
But he's,
But
you
he's not
know,
gonna get on the rate.
previous commissioners that weren't very excited about rail. This commissioner really
Makes
is.
one want to go, E-I-E-I-O.
Yeah, right. How do you spell cow? Yeah. I love that commercial.
You know,
So-
cow had 2 syllables.
Right. So that's their meeting at 10 o'clock.
All right.
3 weeks ago. They're really working on the card.
And Ken?
Yep, I'll do this really quickly, I think, and maybe we'll actually be done before the whole next start. There is a meeting, the next meeting of the Association of Regional Planning Commissions is scheduled for next Monday. People want to know what it is. Monday at 1:30 p.m. at the local government center in Compton. So if anybody's specifically interested in doing some carpooling or something of that sort, please feel free to let me or Bob know. What I will say is the agenda includes an overview of the sort of session coming up and whatever LSRs have been submitted so far. The deadline for the House, I think, was just recently still out of it. So this always is a hard thing to gauge because stuff comes in and LSRs don't necessarily accurately describe the entirety of the bill that it is supposed to do. So we're starting that. But we also had 2 specific legislators who wanted to come and talk with the association about bills that they have sponsored. So we haven't done that before, so we figured let's try this and see if this might be a way for folks to have a chance to sort of talk about what their bills were. One is something called a paint stewardship program, which I think is an attempt to make sure that we can dispose of oil-based paints anytime rather than just having to wait for once a year when you have the hazardous waste thing. And another is the state economic development plan. So we'll be listening to those in. We'll talk a little bit about the fact that there is a bill, again, there's been one for the last several years, about repealing workforce housing provisions. So that's sort of an annual thing. The sense is it probably doesn't have much traction, but it does provide an opportunity each year when this issue comes up for people to get educated and talk about it, what other ideas. So those are the major agenda items. And I will mention also just as an aside that the Commission on Housing Policy and Regulation, which has to do with are there things in the system, either locally or at state level, that inhibit the development of housing, or inappropriately inhibit the development of housing. And the chair of the Association of Regional Planning Commissions is a member of that commission, so I've been attending those meetings. The next one I think is scheduled for later on this month. And this is only the 3rd meeting, so I'm not sure where all this is going, but there have been people who've been bringing up things that they have encountered in their profession that they think maybe rules or regulations or standards or whatever that may have had a purpose at one point in time to stop something from happening, but either the technology has changed, the environment has changed, whatever. So those things, while they're still there, become an impediment and don't accomplish what they were originally intended to accomplish. So, you know, if you go back and you look at all the laws in the state of New Hampshire, you find laws that are the same. I don't know what this is all about. But nobody ever got around to taking them out or removing them once they're there. I mean, we think about adding laws, we don't think about taking them away. So this is kind of looking at maybe laws that have been there that ought to be amended or removed that inhibit the ability to provide housing.
Thank you. Just the only other thing is other business, if there isn't any, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll hold. Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good job, Mr.